Duncan Cass-Beggs is Executive Director of the Global AI Risks Initiative at the Center for International Governance Innovation, focusing on developing innovative governance solutions to address current and future global issues relating to artificial intelligence. Cass-Beggs has more than 25 years of experience working on domestic and international policy issues, most recently as Head of Strategic Foresight at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. Duncan Cass-Beggs' talk is titled Building Blocks for International Cooperation on Next Generation AI. Welcome to the stage, Duncan Cass-Beggs.
Oops. Thank you very much. Good morning. Bonjour. I'm delighted to speak to you today about building blocks for future international agreements to address global scale challenges from next generation AI systems. Let's see if these work. So I will make 4 points. While there is uncertainty about future AI development, we have a responsibility to be prepared to handle even the most extreme and difficult scenarios. Second, future AI systems have tremendous potential for good, but they could also raise global scale challenges that we're currently not prepared for. These challenges are sharing prosperity, managing risks, and making legitimate decisions about the global implications of AI for humanity's future. Third, we currently don't have the means to handle these challenges. We can address this by designing and adopting now key building blocks that will likely be needed for effective international cooperation on global AI challenges. And finally, while the obstacles to international cooperation are immense, there are potential strong reasons of mutual self-interest in cooperating, and this for both leading AI powers and non-AI powers. So there's tremendous uncertainty when it comes to the future of AI. And perhaps the greatest uncertainty is really around the pace of AI development and the kinds of AI capabilities that could be achieved in the coming years. So a tool that we like to use in strategic foresight when dealing with deep uncertainty and unpredictability are scenarios. And I'm going to turn to 5 here. In terms of covering the waterfront in terms of what kind of capabilities development we could see in the coming years. So the first scenario, it's called stall. And in this scenario, there's no meaningful further progress in AI development. And AI in, for example, 2030 is no more capable than it is today. I'm picking this 2030 as a date, but feel free to pick your own, 2027, 2035. Conceptually, it's similar. The stall scenario may be near impossible short of some cataclysmic conflict or cyber event, but it serves to bound the range of possibilities. It's worth noting that even if we had a magic wand and could somehow freeze AI capabilities where they are now, we would likely still see unprecedented transformation as current AI systems are deployed across the economy and society, much as it took time for electricity and other technologies to be adopted in new processes and business models in the past. The second scenario is plateau. AI in 2030 is only marginally more capable than it is today. This is posited by some as resulting from steeply diminishing marginal returns from current approaches such as scaling, and the view that alternative paradigms may take a long time to develop. Scenario 3, continued fast development. In this scenario, AI is significantly more advanced in 2030 through a combination of continued returns to scaling, inference, tool use, and additional innovations. One of the most impactful achievements in this period could be the development of AI systems capable of automating AI R&D itself. First, capable of automating tasks that take a human AI engineer 2 hours, then tasks that take a day or more, reaching the full abilities of top AI researchers eventually. This kind of development could then lead to the next scenario. Scenario 4, rapid and accelerating AI development. Under this scenario, in 2030, AI has reached so-called artificial general intelligence, or AGI, roughly defined as systems that match or exceed human-level proficiency in most or all relevant cognitive capabilities. These can be imagined as drop-in virtual workers, AI systems that are capable of expert human-level performance at any kind of task that can be done in front of a computer. It's worth noting that this scenario is what the leading AI companies themselves have claimed they are on track to achieve by 2027. And while we should be skeptical, given the incentives of AI companies to exaggerate their progress, these claims are also considered plausible by a number of whistleblowers and other independent observers. An interesting feature of this scenario is that when one human-level AI has been developed, it becomes possible almost immediately to run multiple copies in parallel 24/7 and at much greater thinking speeds and communication bandwidths than humans. This could add up to what Dario Amodei of Anthropic has called a country of geniuses in a data center. This could mean that the concept of roughly human-level AGI is fleeting. Short of policy action to the contrary, we could very rapidly fly past this, leading to the next scenario. Scenario 5, exponential AI development. In 2030, AI has reached artificial superintelligence, or ASI, roughly defined as vastly exceeding human-level proficiency across all or most capabilities. Now, vastly exceeding is a vague term, but one could picture intelligence that is more capable than all humans combined. We could be no more able to comprehend its perspectives than a small animal is capable of comprehending ours. This is also the stage, if not sooner, at which an AI could become effectively embodied, having developed the means to act upon the physical universe, either through robotics or some other mechanism. And finally, as we're seeing, one of the main capabilities being actively instilled in these systems is the capacity for agency and to pursue objectives with increasing levels of autonomy. So this graph provides a visual representation from stall to plateau to continued rapid development to accelerating and finally exponential. Now, given how rapidly AI has developed in recent years and how young the science is, it's not surprising that reasonable people can disagree about which scenario is most likely. It's healthy and necessary that we have ongoing good faith debate on this based on the best available evidence and rational arguments. However, it is no longer reasonable from a public policy perspective to remain ignorant or unprepared for any of these scenarios. This risk may be greatest when it comes to scenarios 3, 4, and 5, which from what I can tell are still barely on the radars of governments and international organizations. We need to take seriously these scenarios, first because there appears to be credible evidence that they are possible, and second, because of the scale of their potential implications. Even if the chance of AGI or ASI were only 5% in the next 5 years, this would be more than enough to require governments to pay attention. Citizens would rightly expect it of them. So what would it mean if we took these scenarios seriously? And I'll move to my second section, global AI challenges. AI raises many issues for public policy, but many of these can and should be addressed by individual governments or by groups of like-minded countries. This allows responsiveness to different values and priorities, as well as experimentation between countries. However, when it comes to the most capable future AI systems, there are some truly global-scale issues that require international cooperation and a coordinated or even common approach. These are issues that cut across borders so that what happens in one country could affect many others. Issues where there is a strong shared interest, even among countries that may agree on very little else. And issues where there may be difficult or impossible for a country to achieve its own national self-interest without cooperating with others. We suggest 3. First, realizing and sharing the potential benefits of AI. Second, managing the most severe global scale risks of AI. And third, enabling effective and legitimate decision-making on choices about AI that affect the future of humanity. I'll speak briefly to each. First, in terms of benefits. AI has the potential to enable unprecedented benefits. It's worth lingering on this for a moment because most public policy discussions don't even begin to consider the potential scale of prosperity and positive transformation that may be possible in a world where there are millions of Einsteins and Marie Curies in a data center making breakthroughs in science, millions of brilliant AI entrepreneurs and engineers translating these breakthroughs into products, and armies of robots mining our solar system for all the necessary materials. The cosmic endowment that could be unlocked by rapidly growing cognitive capability is so vast as to make the economic growth of recent centuries look paltry in comparison. Many of these benefits can be realized, especially initially, through private markets and global free trade that distributes goods and services around the world that are simultaneously built both better and at much lower cost. However, global cooperation may be needed to address three kinds of market failures. First, ensuring widespread access to safe AI tools so that they can be leveraged for maximum prosperity and responsiveness to local needs. Second, provision of global public goods such as medical breakthroughs or green technologies that may be underprovided by private companies or any single government. And third, ensuring that the benefits are shared to raise the prosperity of all humanity, not just a small number of people who developed the AI. The final thing to say about potential benefits is that we only get them if we manage to avoid the worst risks, which leads me to the risks. Like any new technology, AI brings novel risks. Some of these risks are not too severe and can be managed lightly, and maybe can even be managed at the national or local level. However, there are some risks posed by AI that are both so severe and of such a global scale of potential impact that the whole world has an interest in ensuring they're managed effectively. These include widening global inequality, AI weaponization and misuse, automated warfare, AI-enabled tyranny, particularly at a global scale, loss of control through gradual disempowerment, and loss of control to a misaligned or rogue artificial superintelligence. Each of these risks are such that any one government can only protect the interests of its own citizens and its own country by preventing certain actions by others outside their borders. And for the most part, this is likely to require international cooperation. Finally, the third global challenge is figuring out how to make legitimate and effective decisions on AI issues affecting the whole world. This includes decisions about benefits and risks, but also decisions affecting the future of humanity, such as whether and under what conditions to create AI smarter than humans, or what role should AI have in relation to humans? Should they be our tool, our servant, our equal, our God, or our successor? How do we build the processes to ensure that such choices are made wisely? Perfection in global decision-making may be beyond our reach at present, but there are many ways we could do better than the current situation, where these decisions are being made by a handful of people in a few companies or countries, or where positive, well-considered decisions are not being made at all. So I'll now turn to the third part, building blocks of international agreements and international cooperation. The international community does not have the processes, mechanisms, and institutions it would need to manage these global AI challenges effectively. While there's much to learn from and build on in other areas of international cooperation and a burgeoning focus on new international principles and commitments related to AI in particular, none of this so far is adequate to handle the scale of the issues that could arise from future advances in AI, and in particular from a world on the cusp of being able to create AGI and ASI. Based on the work of a number of scholars in this area, we can identify the following 9 building blocks that are likely to prove essential components in any future regime of international cooperation. Indeed, most of these building blocks would likely be required as part of a variety of different configurations of international agreements that might be possible or even pursued in parallel, such as agreements between AI powers and their respective allies, agreements between rival AI powers, or ultimately, ideally, broader multilateral agreements that potentially include all countries in the world. The main building blocks are as follows: objectives and principles, commitments and mechanisms around building shared scientific understanding, commitments and mechanisms for realizing common benefits and shared prosperity, commitments on safety standards and managing global scale risks. This would include agreed thresholds on risk tolerance and common measures for the degree of safety that AI systems must reach in order to be authorized for development or deployment, as well as the mechanisms to prevent unauthorized development or deployment, such as of AI systems that pose severe global scale risks. Fifth, technical cooperation to encourage collaboration and joint monitoring on AI research that is too difficult or dangerous for any one country to carry out alone. Emergency response protocols, decision-making processes, verification and compliance, and finally, new or adapted institutional arrangements to support these various commitments. To be effective, these building blocks should be designed based not on the criteria of what is politically feasible today, but rather what would be certain to be effective at handling the full range of future AI development scenarios under the most challenging circumstances. This requires, to a certain extent, overbuilding instruments that may not ever be needed under favorable scenarios, such as if AI capabilities reach a plateau or if there are sufficient breakthroughs in AI safety and alignment, but that would also be sufficiently robust to ensure the safe development or deployment of systems that could pose global-scale safety risks. Designing these building blocks is potentially complicated and should not be left to the last minute. For this reason, my organization, CIGI, in collaboration with a number of other think tanks and civil society organizations, many of them in the room today, from all 5 continents, are beginning to work to prepare initial proposals in the form of draft articles and a legal commentary covering considerations, pros and cons of various options. However, we strongly believe that governments and international organizations should also be conducting this kind of work, explicitly preparing for the kinds of potentially unprecedented levels of international cooperation that may be needed in a world increasingly capable of creating machines much smarter than humans. Finally, let's turn to motivations and incentives. It will come as no surprise to say that the type of international cooperation and agreement I've just described would be extremely challenging to realize in today's political and geopolitical context, to the point of seeming potentially utopian and unachievable. I don't dispute this, but would simply contend that once governments begin to explore the full range of future AI development scenarios and their implications, it is both plausible and likely imperative that they come to recognize that their own national self-interest and the well-being and survival of their own citizens can only be secured through effective international cooperation. The case for this is easiest to see for the vast majority of countries that are not leading AI powers and are not likely to develop AGI and ASI within their borders. For countries in this category, whether they be small or large, or in the global south or global north, there is a strong incentive to build international cooperation and rules around the development of AI and to encourage the leading AI powers to act responsibly on behalf of humanity. Indeed, while few governments realize this yet, it's arguable that reaching some kind of international agreement of this nature is vastly more important to the well-being of their citizens than any domestic public policy they may pursue with regards to the much less capable AI systems likely to be developed or deployed in their countries. But what of the AI powers themselves, such as the United States or China and perhaps a few other countries who plausibly have the talent, capital, computing power, and political support to drive forwards towards AGI and ASI? For them, the motivations for international cooperation seem less clear. Indeed, the obvious first intuition is to go for the win. Be the first to develop AGI and ASI and use this unprecedented capability to secure decisive strategic advantage over one's rivals and indeed the entire world. However, this strategy depends on a number of key assumptions holding true. The AI power in question must be just, yes, that's right. The AI power in question must be able to achieve sufficient advance over its rivals to be confident that it can carry out a decisive strategic act, such as disrupting the AI development capabilities of its rivals, without facing effective challenge in the form of a countervailing AI-enabled or conventional military action. The second assumption that must hold is that it becomes possible to ensure effective control or alignment of very capable AI systems. Currently, this seems likely not to be the case for the foreseeable future. While it may be possible to develop highly capable AI systems, possibly reaching AGI or ASI, scientists currently don't know how to ensure that a lesser intelligence, humans, would be able to reliably maintain control over a vastly greater intelligence on a sustainable and ongoing basis. Without such control, it is likely that such AI systems could eventually pose a catastrophic risk to public safety and security, and likely a worse risk than posed by their geopolitical adversaries. In this context, it would be a mutual interest of all AI powers to cooperate to ensure that neither one of them nor anyone else develops an AI system with the potential to pose an existential risk to humanity until it can be figured out how to control or otherwise align such systems. Finally, the third assumption is that the political checks and balances within the AI power could be sufficiently robust to prevent an AI from being captured or controlled by a certain faction and used to advance their own interests rather than the national interest. Given the degree of power that will be afforded by controlling a superintelligence, if controlling one were ever possible, it would not be surprising if an individual or small faction, such as a CEO, a president, or a group of generals, attempted to seize control of the ASI and use the power to dominate over their rivals. In a context where checks and balances appear unlikely to be sufficiently robust at the national level to prevent such a takeover, it may be in the national self-interest of AI powers to ensure that the most powerful AI systems are governed internationally in an arrangement where the balance of hard power between partners ensures that no single faction can take control of the ASI. In short, if these assumptions don't hold, and they all appear quite vulnerable, then it is highly likely that even the leading AI powers will need to cooperate with each other and other governments around the world to safeguard their own national self-interest and well-being of their citizens. There's absolutely no guarantee that such rationality will prevail. The history of both national and international governance is littered with failures to pursue or achieve what is in the enlightened self-interest of all parties concerned. But the fundamental basis for shared interest across humanity in the context of advanced AI provides strong reason to at least attempt to build the international cooperation needed to make this possible. So we've looked at scenarios, global challenges, building blocks, and finally incentives. And I'll skip my summary and turn instead to a final point about our historic responsibility. If you are following closely the torrent of accelerating AI capabilities and thinking ahead to where this could all be heading, then you may occasionally wish you could just shut this all out from your mind and ignore it. We didn't ask to be born at this point of history where decisions taken in the coming years could be pivotal for the future of all Earth-originating intelligent life. I'm reminded of this quote by a character in the television series Black Mirror. Didn't expect to find myself living in the future, but here I freaking well am. Well, folks, here we freaking well are. We can't change the channel or go back to bed. We all have a responsibility and a role in helping to navigate AI development successfully. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now we'll take some questions.
Hi, my name is Mark Rotenberg. I'm with the Center for AI and Digital Policy. And with due respect to both of our speakers on this panel, I find it enormously discouraging that there has been no mention of the AI governance frameworks that have already been established that I think address many of the points that you and the speaker before you have raised. I was here at the OECD several years ago when we drafted the AI principles, the first governance framework for AI adopted by 42 countries and then by the G20. UNESCO adopted the UNESCO recommendation on AI ethics in 2021 with all countries participating. Many people in this room know about the EU AI Act, which is a comprehensive regulatory framework. In fact, this week, the prohibitions on unsafe AI systems go into force. There's the Council of Europe AI Treaty with 37 signatories supporting human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. And finally, at the UN, we have the Global Digital Compact urged by the Secretary General. My point is that many frameworks are already underway to establish precisely the governance that you're seeking and to address many of these challenges. And we are in a moment where the enforcement and implementation of these frameworks is vital and urgent. Frankly, we don't have the time for a blank sheet exercise that asks people, let us imagine the solutions to AI governance. Much of this work has already been done. And I'm making these remarks, frankly, to the people in this room, because I know that many of you are working in the field of AI governance, truly to urge you to push forward these frameworks that now exist. We really don't have the time. I think that is the central message from Stuart and Joshua and others about where we are in this moment. So thank you for the presentation, but please, please engage the current debate. There's a lot of work to be done.
Thank you very much, Mark. I fully agree that we don't have much time, and I also fully recognize the immense wealth that we have in terms of the many principles, many of which I've been involved with and or watching closely over the recent years. I wish I could share your confidence about their readiness and ability to handle the kinds of challenges that we may face in a very short period of time. I believe a number of them have the potential, if they were backed up by serious commitments and mechanisms to put them into force. Some of that thinking is in process. I don't believe it is moving at the pace that it needs to be ready for the most challenging scenarios that we face. We need to build on what we have. There's no suggestion of a blank slate here, but we do need to ramp up the acceleration towards systems, towards international cooperation mechanisms that would actually handle the most challenging scenarios, and we're not there yet.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question, and that is, how can global coordination be achieved among countries with different economic, cultural, and political interests? How can global coordination be achieved? That's my question.
Yeah. Well, it is extremely challenging to reach across different cultures, different geographies, vastly different economic and political realities. I certainly do not want to minimize that. I would claim that when it comes to the issues that we're talking about at this conference, they are issues that bring the whole world together. They are issues where we have a very strong and very urgent shared common interest. And ultimately, it must be that leads us to build cooperation across various divides.
Hi, good day. I'm Leantoinette Chua of AI Safety Asia. My question tries to tie up the previous talk to your talk, with a focus on the temporal aspects of things. So I ran a quick look on how long it took each organization from founding to achieving a golden standard milestone, a widely recognized, mature, and globally adopted framework that set the benchmark for their fields. International Maritime Organization, 30 years. Financial Action Task Force, 14 years, 1-4. And International Civil Aviation Organization, 5 years. I have 2 questions. Number 1, which, meaning what period or number of years from standard authority body founding to golden standard milestone we should be heading. So a question on aspiration, something that maybe Dr. Traeger and I would go over a long conversation on the aspirations. But my question for you would be the second. And where are we on that, on the state of play of current or high-level regimes for international cooperation on safe and ethical AI lifecycle as of January 2025, end of January 2025, because we had lots of developments last month, right? Are we projected to take 30 years, 14 years, or 5 years? It's important, though tall ask, so I'm asking for your expert hypotheses to help inform feasibility for activation. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. If I were to give my expert hypotheses, it wouldn't be very optimistic. So I'm much more aspirational in my sense that we don't have the luxury of 30 years. We may not have the luxury of 5. I like to joke that AI years are a little bit like dog years. You know, we're seeing increasingly 7 years of development happening every year. I think the practical way around that is to take a lesson from the tech industry itself, which is to move fast, put things out in beta. We may find that we need to be harnessing all of the best ideas in the world and putting them before leaders in 6 months' time if there's suddenly a kind of freak out moment which realizes, okay, you know, that our current approaches are going to have to change. We're actually going to have to work together to secure our common interests on some of these ways, and we need mechanisms that allow us to do that. 6 months from now, we're not going to have anything much better than you know, a draft collectively if we all put our heads together. But we can then keep working on that, and we'll hope to have something even better in a year or 2 years or 3 years. But I think we don't have the luxury of aiming for the perfect product that may take 5, 10, or 15 to achieve.
All right, thank you. I see many more hands. So it actually turns out that our third speaker is unfortunately unavailable today. So our speakers have agreed to an extended Q&A, so we can actually accommodate the many questions. And there's one in the back, and Robert, if you would like to come up, I can give you this mic. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Christian Castellani. I am from civil society, worried about AI development. I would say that your perspective on what is feasible and what is the interest of the powers to be is quite interesting. But I'm a bit worried that you are very optimistic on the capacity of superpowers to come to an agreement. I will speak a bit about the elephant in the room. President Trump's first action was to cancel the AI decree, which was by itself quite weak, but which was trying to regulate a little bit the development of new systems. And then he claimed that his goal is to be the first and beat China. So I think in this sense, we are going really on the wrong direction, and I am a bit afraid that for the next 4 years, 5 years, there will be little progress on international cooperation. And the Paris Summit is not even putting this question on the forefront. So it's even a regression in relation to the 2 previous summits. So that's my worry about what you have presented.
I can go first. Yeah, I think I share most of your concerns there. I'm not presenting a particular optimism. I'm suggesting an avenue when it comes to the interests, and I think this is probably one of the areas that will need a significant amount of work by people in this room, is thinking through the ways of explaining to all parties why their interests may ultimately lie from different paths than those that they may be currently pursuing. But that is a crucial challenge of our times.
Maybe I'll just say two quick things in an attempt to say something hopeful, as much as I agree with the sentiment of the comment. And the first is that in conversations with folks in the incoming administration responsible for tech policy, there are definitely people who are sensitive to some of the issues that have been brought up here today and are thinking very seriously about those things. So I think that there are people for the folks in this room to engage with there. Secondly, I think, especially in Washington, D.C. And elsewhere, you often hear about the difficulty of rivals cooperating with each other. And people will talk about the state of relations and say, well, there's no point in thinking about something. But in this context, I think we have to remember all the times that rivals have cooperated in the past. So if you think, for instance, about the Non-Proliferation Treaty, when people were writing books, maybe it's easy to forget now, like Bertrand Russell, the well-known philosopher, wrote a book, Will Man Survive? People were worried, and they got together and eventually formed a non-proliferation regime that was started by the United States and the Soviet Union that got together and then sold it to the rest of the world. So they were not friends, but they did cooperate on common interest.
We have one mic over there, and then we'll go here next.
Thank you. So we've been hearing through the last 5 talks in this room about global AI risk to humanity, and I'm shocked that there has not been one mention, unless I've missed it, of the risk of runaway AI energy demand pushing us over a climate tipping point, potentially in the next decade or two. Something that cannot be reversed by, let's say, AI helping us get to fusion faster. So an AMOC collapse, for example. Can you comment on the reasons for that omission and that sort of silence when we're talking about global AI risks to humanity?
You go first.
I mean, I think the risk to humanity, I think of the risk to humanity from the climate as related to AI, but not, I don't think of those things necessarily as always connected. I think the future trajectories of AI development may involve huge amounts of energy. I think that's right. But in some cases, as far as I can tell, based on the energy scientists that I talk to, some of the ideas about the current impact of AI in terms of energy and water and things like that have been slightly mischaracterized, but it's not directly my area of science, so I'm relying on the judgment of people for whom I think it is. But we have I guess my view is similar to Anka Dragon's earlier, that we have a lot of things that we have to worry about, and we should worry about all of those things. Yeah, I think that's what I want to say. Thanks.
I'll just add a small point, which is, I think clearly we need to take very seriously the carbon emissions related to computing power and energy use. I think, ideally we would look at this within one's global carbon budget and allocate that accordingly. It may be that the potential benefits of AI are so significant that we would be comfortable with the kind of consumption that those systems are going to make, and we would cut correspondingly elsewhere. I think one of the challenges in making a kind of rational decision on that is when AI is seen as a kind of arms race dynamic, where there's sort of, and we are seeing this play out in terms of, urgent needs to suddenly, seek other sources of power to run data centers. And so I think the issue is there and is one we're going to have to grapple with.
Thank you. We have a mic there, and we'll come here next.
So a question, I guess, for Robert, but both can answer. This is Daniele Cattedu, Cloud Security Alliance. We heard from Anka and from you earlier about the importance of standards, except that for a person who has been in standards for some time, we know the standards are based on consensus, so they are very, very, very slow to develop. Now, how do you think we can cope? Because we don't have the time for that process of consensus. So how are we going to build those commonly agreed solutions for AI safety? And how do you see, for a person that is coming from the cybersecurity space, the role of cybersecurity in the bigger picture that you were depicting before? And finally, as we want to be pragmatic, because as we have heard a lot, there is pressure, there is a lot of goodwill of generating high-level frameworks that can help us in governing the AI phenomenon, but it feels to me that unless we start doing very quick baby steps, concrete baby steps, we are not going to make it.
Yeah, just on that last point, I think there's so much that's hopeful about AI development. There's extraordinary ways that it's supercharging science that I wish we also were focusing on. But in terms of the governance of the technology, I think you're right that we are behind. I think that's a common theme that everyone here is talking about, and I don't think we should try to sugarcoat that. I absolutely agree with you. I'll just say on standards that I think certainly standard processes are not known for moving at light speed in many cases, but there are degrees. There are some processes that move quicker than others, and there are cases, for instance, where both governments and civil society, and in some cases academics, have developed what sometimes are referred to as pre-standardization processes, but in effect have actually developed standards which are then passed to an organization like the ISO or a standards body and adopted actually wholesale. So I think that is hopeful from our point of view, that is from the point of view of those of us in this room who are trying to solve some of these problems, that sometimes some of the things that we do can feed in to some of those other processes in ways that do take time, should take time to a degree, and that there needs to be voice for many different stakeholders, but don't take as much time as some other sorts of processes.
Thank you. I just wanted to, on Shannon Valor's point on the climate and getting the specificity of governance and what that really looks like, I wondered if you guys could comment on the regulation of the financial investments and capital being poured into AI. I know that people have, like Hayden Bellfield's work here on regulating infrastructure and compute. The things that go into developing AI is in and of itself an interesting form of governance and trying to regulate that, and whether the role in the United States, the SEC has a greater role to play in governing how and who develops AI. And I think from the hints at the sort of geopolitical competition that exists in AI generally, the space for AI and military and national security effects has been, is potentially well in hand or better in hand than perhaps other governments who are seeking to regulate and to scale and to build AI for economic impact. And frankly, I think the most recent news today that Keir Starmer isn't coming next week, and the result of the AI Opportunities Action Plan that came out of the UK last week as well is perhaps a shift in the UK government's perspective or approach to see AI as this tool for economic growth and development, and thus whether that corresponds to a need for us to regulate some of the incentives behind that.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on the financial side, and I look forward to hearing Hayden's work on that. But I'd say as a general principle, if we are to, I don't think we're there yet. I think the world hasn't woken up yet, quite frankly. I think there hasn't been yet the equivalent of the kind of March 2020, where the world's leaders and citizens are ready and to demand the necessary action commensurate to deal with the issues. But even when we do get there, I believe that, and one needs to move very quickly, I believe that sort of an across-the-board approach that looks at what are our levers around all of the various inputs is likely warranted, at least to be looked at. We've been very focused on compute and on limiting compute and thresholds of compute thresholds and so forth, which we already have seen just from DeepSeek as the latest example of what we were talking about a couple of years ago in this room about that potential for discontinuous improvements in algorithmic efficiency that make suddenly your managing the compute side a lot more challenging. So I think computing is probably still going to be one of the central levers, but we need to look at potentially data, certainly talent, and the commitments that people in the sector take for when they're working in this space, and the finances and the potentially the energy and all of above may be required, at least to be assessed in terms of their potential to be relevant to whatever necessary regulatory efforts may be required, while at the same time always seeking the lightest touch that's possible to get the job done.
There's someone with a scarf back there. Okay.
Well, hello, my name is José Renato. Thank you very much for the presentation. So my question actually would be with regard to within the frameworks that you guys are trying to develop, how do you see that such initiatives would not be captured by specific worldviews and epistemologies? And I'm talking mostly how to guarantee that they are not just going to reinforce priorities from the north, from minority world, as many are calling, instead of or in cooperation with the majority. And I'm talking about for instance, issues related to resource allocation, to whom the production of lithium is going to whom the production of gold, in order to fill this, to build hardwares and so on, but also what relates to workers' rights who are labeling these technologies and curating them and so on and so forth. So how within this framework will priorities from other regions who are being most affected by these other issues are to be implemented? I don't know if I made myself clear, but...
Well, there's the UN Global Dialogues, as was mentioned. So that's something that is happening now, which can be a broad forum for discussion of exactly these issues. So I think we need these fora, and we also need action. And I think on the action side, I don't think it'll likely be one big solution. There may be some big solution, but I think a lot of little solutions are sort of what we need to think about in terms of immediate action. I mean, computing resources can be rented. A lot of places around the world are talking about sovereign compute and investing in that. But local data, that's something that there's no substitute for. Data in an actual cultural space. And we know that there are lots of spaces that are hidden, that are not represented in the corpuses of data that are creating advanced AI. That feels like a problem that we can actually tackle or may be able to. It's not that easy, because we have to do it in some sort of responsible way. We have to make sure that data isn't misused for a political purpose. We have to make sure that it's consensual and satisfies a set of ethical criteria when we're collecting it. So it's not easy to do, but it feels like something that we could have a broad-based initiative and be sure that all these communities around the world are participating in advanced AI. That's just one example, but I think it's the kind of thing, if we put a lot of those together, I think we can do a lot of good here.
I'll just only add that, I think this is a real issue. There are power dynamics, both within and across societies, that have an effect on international negotiations, and not only in terms of the content, but the framing as well. And there's something we need to be vigilant on in this space. I think that when it comes to the kind of issues that we're raising when we're looking forward at the kinds of much more capable AI systems that we could be dealing with in the coming years, that it's, and the really kind of global scale challenges those raise, I think that creates a potential for, as mentioned, realizing where the common interests lie. I think, in fact, quite strongly across various like north-south divides and others, and that really it's by seeing that common interest and working together that one gets the most important achievements for one's society. But that doesn't mean that there won't still be a lot of this happening in other ways.
Great, so we have time for 2 more questions. We'll go here and here.
Thank you both for your presentations today. My name is Daniel Petrogallo. I'm a law professor from the University of Denver. And I know we've talked about how there's likely to be no AI governance regulation at the federal level over the next 4 years. And I would just suggest that in the absence of federal regulation, you might see the states play more of a leading role. And specifically, I'm referring to states like Colorado and California. Colorado has passed the Colorado AI Act, which is the first state-level U.S. AI governance law. And so I'm just curious how, as an international community, you might engage attorney generals and governors at the U.S. state level to advance U.S. policy and AI governance and to find consensus and harmony with the international community. Thank you.
I'm going to leave it to the international relations expert to talk about particularly the links between the involvement of subnational entities in international relations, although it's a fascinating question. I think I would just push back a little bit on the assumption that the federal government, federal government is likely to be very, very involved in the potential development of AGI and ASI over the coming years, whatever form that might take. Some have spoken of soft nationalization. There's a wide range of options between the kind of classical AGI Manhattan Project and looser forms. But given the strategic significance that I believe is now very well recognized, particularly within this security establishment, but more broadly as well, the significance both for narrowly America's security interests, but more broadly its sort of economic role in the world. I don't think the days of this being, the decisions being solely left to a few companies are going to last with us 4 years. I'm not making a prediction, but I would just caution at least at that assumption.
I'll just say quickly, I think we need to pull on all threads, and I think you're absolutely right that those are really important threads to pull on, and I think that basically that argument holds, I think, for many jurisdictions around the world, but there is this tension with the word is often used, interoperability, and I think jurisdictions will be concerned about that. They'll be concerned, when OpenAI released an AI agent recently, and Sam Altman, when he did so, he specifically mentioned that it wouldn't be released in Europe and the UK for quite some time. And I think that seemed to be a sort of reference to the regulation that's going on there. So I think these are these are sort of all the concerns. We don't know which of the horses in terms of jurisdictions and states is going to be the most successful. I wouldn't give up on the federal government in the US because I do think there is some energy there, and in a lot of areas of policy we don't know what direction it's going to go.
Yes. This is Paolo Giudici, University of Pavia in Italy. My question is about prioritization. From your talks and also previously and in general in all international regulations and let's say fora, there is the idea that we can predict all possible risks of AI right now and try to regulate them all. But we know that in practice this is not possible, as you also pointed out. That could be also the reason why international trends are so slow and require time to be enforced. So my question is, what about prioritization? Why don't we sit down and prioritize 1, 2, 3, the most important risks of AI, sit down, build a measure together and work on it, as was done somehow into the financial risk management industry. That is where I have my experience, in which they start from market risk, value at risk, took some years, then they move to another one, and then to another one. So that's my question. Very often, it seems that we like it to be very holistic, have a very general view on everything, but that is really not possible with the shorter time span that we have. Thank you very much.
I mean, I'd say that sensible, rigorous prioritization is just one example of the kind of approach one takes when one is getting serious on governing effectively around certain issues. And it's certainly one where the AI community, which is so new, has a tremendous amount to learn. I think in risk management, there's no need to fully reinvent the wheel when given the kind of professionalization of these kinds of issues in many other sectors. And I think that one of the pieces that's really hampered public policy in this space over recent years has been a lack of engagement with the most challenging scenarios, even a lack of using the words artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence. These are words that have been around for a long time. They're the words used by academia and by business. They're on the websites of the businesses. They're explicitly claiming that this is what they're going to develop. Now, governments can create new words for these if they like and define them even more carefully, which would be another really great example of the kind of professional, serious work that would happen once the sort of more adults are in the room on this case. But we can't have an effective public dialogue or an effective public policy discussion if we don't even use the words and if we don't even accept the concepts that we may be actually having to deal with within the coming years. So yeah, I think there's a huge range for upping our game across the board on this. But it starts with taking a serious look at where we could be headed.
I just think that's exactly what we need to do. We need to quantify as much as we can. We need to take all the lessons from the other industries as much as we can and develop risk management frameworks as exist in other industries. I think there's some specific challenges. We also need to recognize some of the things that we're talking about. We just have less data. When you're talking about an airplane or something like that, and you just have a huge amount of data and a huge amount of testing that can go into it. When you're talking about societal impacts from AI, we don't yet have that data, and the impacts may be large enough in some cases that we don't just want to get that data after the fact. We may want to think in advance about consequences and governance. So I think there are differences, but I think drawing on all these other fields and please get involved and work in that area because that's exactly what we need to do.